So here, I mean, this project in Kiev, Ukraine, was about taking a very large trove of videos that documented the Euromaidan protests and seeing how they could be used to create a better understanding of specific acts of violence, ultimately deaths of civilians, as well as deaths of police, through the kind of mobilization of these videos. And so what you're looking at right now is actually a montage that was created by a woman named Evelina Nefertari, who is a collaborator on this project. And on the upper left is the timestamp, so that's 9:25 a.m. This is on February 20th, 2014, the deadliest day of the Euromaidan protests. And as you can see here, there's many videos that were overlapping in time. So every video you see here overlaps in time. If you see the screen go gray, it's because there's 11 videos instead of 12. Sometimes there's more, 13 or 14. But this kind of body of work that Evelina undertook to sync to time, to kind of sync these videos was extremely useful as a foundation for an event reconstruction. Once we understood when the videos were taken, we could start to ask the question, where were they taken? And then finally, what are we seeing in these videos that can help us in a legal context? Trying to advance the video here. And at the same time, as I think we all know, there's in situations like when there's civil unrest and protests, it's an urban event, it's in a city, it's happening over an extended period of time. It's by definition very complex, and that complexity lends itself to, I think, the potential of competing narratives. There were many narratives about responsibility and accountability in terms of the Euromaidan protests. Was it just police firing on civilians? Were there snipers? Were those snipers Russian forces? Were they proto-fascist forces? There was a lot of stories and narratives that were kind of vying for authority. And so our role in some way is to try and cut through as many, the kind of complexity to establish a baseline understanding of events. And I would say that the defense in these cases often relies on complexity alone to undercut any potential accountability. How is it possible to come to any conclusions? It was just too complex. And so whether it's in the media or it's in academic contexts, this is some work that was done by somebody also looking at sort of third and fourth party actors during the Euromaidan protests, undermining sort of narratives that were out there. These are all kind of things that are in the ether and inform the questions that we're trying to analyze, the work that we're taking on. One of the basic challenges of this work is the sheer volume of the videos that need to be analyzed, and also not just the volume, but because it's all user-generated content coming from different people, they all have, it's messy, right? This is a peek into one small folder of the project, different file types, different naming conventions. It's the opposite of efficient and opposite of organized when we first get it. And so the kind of task of how to deal with this much video is a super important question, because it can become prohibitive. It can be the thing that makes the work impossible. And so we worked with Carnegie Mellon Center for Human Rights Science to look at some ways to sort of streamline and perhaps even automate some of the processing of this video. I don't know if we have a slide of that, but basically this is the format that we ultimately wanted in as analysts. What you see here is the name of the video, the location and latitude and longitude, and the time it was taken. And what was, as compelling as Evelina's analysis was of the time syncing, she had not created a spreadsheet, right, where we could easily query and find videos. And so for us to even begin our work, we have to get into a usable format. And so from Evelina's initial analysis to the actual videos themselves, they have to get organized, to this, which is a kind of spreadsheet which helps us actually organize them, is an important sequence of events. The translation from here to here is where we were looking at how far automation could get us, and that's where Carnegie Mellon was really plugging in, doing some really important work. And there's a lot of potential there, and we're kind of continuing to build on. in addition to the video files, the video files alone are not enough, right? So we have pathology reports, in this case, medical reports, which are showing us entry and exit wounds on individuals who were killed that day. We have laser scans of the site. This is a high-resolution laser scan that Evelina worked on as well, getting large parts of the urban environment in millimeter scale detail in 3 dimensions. And so this kind of nexus, in some ways our role is to take disparate spatial data, whether it's video, photo, pathology reports, laser scans, and to put them into a kind of coherent spatial narrative. And we're doing all of this work for the attorneys who are representing families of protesters that were killed in demonstrations. So this is all being done for use in court, as distinct from an advocacy output, which in other projects we've done, that's been the kind of the format. This is for a legal context. And so admissibility constraints, questions of even what the courtroom is set up to handle in terms of technology, these are sort of fundamental questions that we have to ask ourselves as we're producing this work in order if it's going to be effective. This is a similar idea to here, but basically in 3 dimensions, you have 3 things going on here. You've got the laser scan in color, which is the highest resolution. You've got the white massing model that surrounds it. And then you have that kind of cottage cheese looking material in the middle, which are ephemera. Those were barricades that were erected out of trash and debris, and kind of temporarily there and then gone. So when someone came back to laser scan the site, those things were not there to be measured and sort of reconstructed. But they're essentially, they're critically important to understanding the sequence of events because they were key perimeters for police at different moments in time. And so the kind of nesting of 3-dimensional laser scans, ephemeral information such as these barricades, and the massing model have to kind of fit together into a kind of coherent model of the site. And one thing that we're struggling with, and I think everyone's struggling with, is how do you handle this much data? The laser scan itself, is billions of points. And so the way we've sort of selectively deployed it has to do with the legal questions. This is the street we're looking at. These are where 3 of the protesters were killed. And we sort of constrain the use of the highest resolution data to that area because it becomes very unwieldy from a technical standpoint very quickly. And that's why you have the area surrounding it in white, much more simplified. And that problem set of how to deal with that amount of spatial data persists, throughout all of our projects, and I think is a big sort of constraint for everyone. This is the platform itself, and so we produced a platform that was going to be used by the attorneys in court, and that's really important to point out. It's a platform that can be queried dynamically, and so you can get information, an overview of the site, of the case. You can drill very deeply into 3 specific deaths and mobilize analysis on those specific deaths because those are the ones that were focused on the trial. And then there's a video archive. The sort of byproduct of our analysis was that we organized all of the video assets and wanted to make it accessible as a kind of something you query in both space and time. I don't know if we have those images here. Oh, we have. Is this a video? Oh, okay. So this is basically, these videos are the kind of tool that was mobilized to talk about or sort of present the analysis of 3 specific deaths. And again, it's an urban environment. We're trying to bring your attention to things that are important. Those buildings, for example, figure in important ways. Location of the victim, location of the barricade, location of the police at the moment that he was killed, locations of videos that document the moment that he was killed. Each, neither capturing both the person that was killed and the shooter, but both capturing that exact moment in time. And so this video kind of just takes you through that sequence, from before the moments of death as police are moving into position, which is what you're seeing here, to the moment that he was shot, and then also looking at it from the perspective of the police who we have captured on CCTV footage. I'm not sure how much of this video is here, or we just advance it.
Yeah, I think all of it is here.
Okay, right. So here, what you'll see is the person who was shot, Dmitriev, walking into position, and what we're trying to establish very clearly, as you'll see in a moment. Is this when the video's already started? Right. So we go back to the massing model, and we go to different footage from a different camera, and the laser scan comes in, which is the highest resolution spatial data we have, and then it's aligned with the video, so we can say this is exactly where he was standing when he was shot, and this is where the pathology reports become important to understand the possible trajectories of a bullet that could have been shot and generated the wounds that he suffered as his body was in that position, and to be able to kind of understand it all in 3 dimensions. Of course, the video is super helpful, but being able to understand this video in relation to where the police were standing, to look at it in relation to some of the audio latency analysis, this is all kind of part of it. Probably more than I can go into here, but and then I think this drawing, out of all the analysis that was done, in some ways is the most critical. The defenses, one of the narratives that was the defense was pushing was, how do we know it wasn't a sniper? How do we know, yes, this person was shot, it's clearly documented in video, but it could have been a sniper on top of a building. Yes, you see police firing directly at him, but how do we know the lethal round wasn't shot from the top of a building somewhere? There's all these narratives around Russian forces, proto-fascist forces. And so part of our analysis had to pivot to address that question. And so there's 2 things that were done. One is the vector you see here. In other words, that kind of trajectory that goes from Dmitriev's position when he was shot back into space. That's the range of positions from which the firearm could have been discharged and created that wound, the lethal round. So it's a cone because there's a degree of uncertainty. We don't know exactly. It's not a direct line, but it's within that area. In relation to that, there is also an audio latency analysis that was conducted by someone we worked with named Michael Knox, who is a ballistics analyst, and basically from analyzing the audio can say something about the distance, a kind of minimal and maximal distance of the sound, the microphone that captures the audio to the weapon that discharged the round, the lethal round, because we know which round was lethal because we have the video footage. And it's a fairly large area. You can see the D1 and D2 are the kind of minimal and maximal areas, but it becomes, when you think about it in relation to the legal argument, which was not a murder charge. In other words, we're not trying to figure out which specific soldier shot which specific civilian. The legal argument is actually a terrorism charge. So was there a coordinated and concerted effort to intimidate and ultimately fire on civilians on the part of the police? And so the spatial analysis goes from having to, if it was a murder charge, having to sort of bring it back to an individual to a kind of a group of individuals, the unit of police. And so with that as a threshold, this type of analysis is useful because we can see the police standing very clearly behind the barricade, and we can rule out a lot of the urban environment that the defense was asserting was a likely sort of point of origin for the lethal round. So it all comes back to kind of addressing what the legal question is. And in some ways, this drawing is, after a lot of analysis, the only one that matters.